The midnight echoes. The cruiser purred beneath Officer David Miller, a low, comforting hum that had become the soundtrack to his life. Midnight to 8 a.m. The graveyard shift. In the sprawling, seemingly idyllic town of Havenwood, it usually meant a predictable rotation of domestic disputes, noise complaints from teenagers, and the occasional lost cat report. David, a man in his late 40s with a salt and pepper mustache and eyes that had seen far too much of humanity's underbelly, prided himself on his unflappable demeanor. He was a cop of logic, of facts, of the concrete. Ghosts and ghouls belonged in cheap paperbacks, not the quiet streets of his patrol. He'd seen the ugly side of life, the truly monstrous things people did to one another, and he found a grim comfort in knowing that evil wore a human face. He'd been doing this for 25 years. 25 years of broken homes, shattered lives, and the endless cycle of human folly. A recent quiet divorce had left his own home feeling emptier, pushing him further into the embrace of his work, into the predictable rhythm of the night. It was just him, the hum of the engine, and the flickering streetlights cutting through the darkness. A silent sentinel in a sleeping town. He liked it that way. Then the calls started to change. The first one came on a particularly cold Tuesday night, the kind of night where the air felt brittle and sound carried strangely. Dispatch crackled in his ear. Unit 27, respond to 4T2 Evergreen Lane. Report of possible breaking and entering. Strange noises. Residence has been abandoned for decades. David sighed. 4T2 Evergreen. Oh, old Blackwell House. Locals called it the Ghost House. A crumbling Victorian mansion, long since boarded up, its history shrouded in rumors of madness and disappearances. Kids dared each other to spend a night there. Usually, it was just teenage vandals. He pulled up to the property, the cruiser's headlights cutting through the overgrown foliage, illuminating the skeletal branches of ancient trees that seemed to claw at the night sky. The air dropped a few degrees the moment he stepped out of the car. An unnerving chill, far colder than the ambient temperature. He walked around the perimeter, flashlight beam cutting through the dense shadows. A broken window, not new, a gaping hole in the back fence, probably a regular entry point. Nothing unusual. He pushed open the creaking front gate, the sound unnaturally loud in the profound silence. As he approached the boarded-up front door, he heard it, a faint whisper like dry leaves rustling across old floorboards, yet distinctly vocal. It seemed to come from inside the house, a low murmur just beyond understanding. "Hello?" David called out, his voice echoing in the empty space. "Police! Come out with your hands up!" Silence. Complete, absolute silence. He circled the house again, checking the back door. It was locked, but the wood was rotting. He saw a small, ornate porcelain doll lying face down on the porch swing, its single visible eye staring blankly at the sky. He was certain it hadn't been there on his last patrol 2 weeks ago. He nudged it with his boot. It rolled, its painted smile fixed and unnerving. He tried the front door again. The boards were loose. He forced one aside, slipping through the narrow gap. The air inside was stagnant, heavy with the scent of dust, decay, and something else. Something vaguely sweet, like lilies mixed with damp earth. He swept his flashlight beam across the cobweb-draped interior. Dust sheets covered skeletal furniture. Everything was still, coated in a thick layer of grime. Then he heard it again. A distinct child's giggle, soft and light, from the top of the grand, curving staircase, followed by a faint, guttural chuckle, too deep for a child, too close for comfort. "Who's there?" David barked, his hand instinctively going to his holstered weapon. The silence that followed was oppressive, a suffocating weight. He swept his light up the stairs. Nothing. just shadows dancing in the beam. He climbed the creaking stairs, each step a groan of protest from the ancient wood. He checked every room, every closet, empty, desolate. He chalked it up to imagination, the eerie atmosphere of an old abandoned house, kids messing around. But as he left, securing the boards back in place, he couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on him, watching from the darkened windows. And he swore, just as he was getting back into his cruiser, that he heard a soft, childlike whisper directly behind him, "You'll be back." The next strange call came a week later. Unit 27, respond to 31 River Bend Drive. Missing person report, Jessica Davies. Husband reported her missing this morning. A routine missing person. David arrived to find a frantic husband, Thomas, pacing their suburban living room. "She just vanished, officer," Thomas stammered, wringing his hands. "Her phone's here. Her keys are here. Her purse. She just walked out the back door for her morning jog and never came back." David interviewed Thomas, took down the details. He checked the backyard. It backed onto a dense patch of woods that led to the winding Havenwood River. No signs of struggle, nothing disturbed. But as he surveyed the area, he noticed something odd. On the patio table, perfectly centered, was a single ornate silver locket. Thomas said it belonged to Jessica, a cherished heirloom she never took off. Yet there it was, lying open, completely undisturbed. The photos inside, of Jessica and Thomas, perfectly pristine. It felt like a deliberate placement, not something accidentally dropped. He walked the wooded path down to the river. The air here was strangely quiet, almost muffled. The river itself flowed with an unnatural stillness, its surface like black glass. As he searched the banks, calling Jessica's name, he heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible humming sound, deep and resonant, seemed to emanate from the water itself. It made the hairs on his arms stand up. And then, for a fleeting moment, he saw it, a shimmer on the water's surface, like heat haze, forming a vague, human-like outline before vanishing. He blinked, rubbing his eyes. Fatigue, he thought. Overwork. He spent hours searching, calling in backup, but Jessica Davies was simply gone. No trace. Like she had stepped into the river and dissolved. The call started to take a toll. David found himself staring into the blackness of his rearview mirror during patrols, half expecting to see a reflection that wasn't his own. He was jumpier, more irritable. His partner on some nights, Officer Sarah Ryan, a younger, sharp woman, noticed. "You okay, Dave?" she asked him one slow night. "You're a bit on edge. Bad coffee or just the shift getting to you?" "Just too many strange calls lately," David mumbled, his gaze fixed on the empty road ahead. The Blackwell house, then Jessica Davies. Nothing adds up. Sarah shrugged. "Havenwood can be quiet, but it has its share of weirdos. And disappearances, well, people run away all the time." "She didn't run away, Sarah," David said, his voice flat. "And those eyes in the Blackwell house, that laugh, it wasn't kids." Sarah looked at him, her brow furrowed. "Dave, you're not actually buying into the ghost stories, are you?" Her tone was light, but there was a hint of concern. "You know what stress does to the mind, lack of sleep." He didn't respond, just gripped the steering wheel tighter. She wouldn't understand. How could she? The unsettling phenomena started bleeding into his personal life, blurring the lines between work and his increasingly isolated home. He'd come home after a long shift, exhausted, only to find small objects moved in his apartment. His keys on the kitchen counter when he swore he'd left them by the door. His coffee mug in the living room when he'd left it by the sink. He started locking his bedroom door even when he was home alone, a desperate, illogical attempt at securing himself from an unseen intrusion. The whispers in his patrol car became more frequent, more distinct. Now, they seemed to call his name, drawing it out, thin and mournful. Sometimes they would morph into familiar voices, the frantic pleas of a domestic dispute victim, the distant cries of a child, the hushed tones of a grieving parent. He'd slam his hand on the dashboard, yelling, "Stop it!" But the sounds would only fade, leaving him questioning his own sanity. He started delving into old archived case files. He spent hours in the precinct basement, surrounded by dusty boxes, poring over cold cases, looking for patterns. He found them, so many unsolved disappearances spanning decades, people who simply vanished, leaving behind unsettlingly pristine scenes like Jessica Davies. Always near specific locations: the Blackwell House, the Havenwood River, an old dilapidated lighthouse overlooking the treacherous coastline 10 miles west of town, Menchefters and Quarters. And a recurring date: late autumn, usually around the last full moon before winter. He found a case from 1987. A young couple, Peter and Susan Walsh, vanished from their home, just a few blocks from the Blackwell House. The report mentioned a strange, high-pitched hum heard by neighbors and a single perfectly preserved porcelain doll found on their porch swing. The same kind of doll he'd seen. A chilling coincidence? He didn't believe in coincidences anymore. He sought out Old Man Finch, a reclusive former park ranger who lived in a small cabin deep in the woods outside town. Finch was known for his eccentricities, his stories of the old ways, and his deep knowledge of the local wilderness. David had always dismissed him as a harmless local character. He found Finch sitting on his porch, whittling a piece of wood into a bird. The air around him felt different, calmer, yet with an ancient stillness. "Officer Miller," Finch said, not looking up from his work. "Didn't think I'd see you out here. Something bothering you?" "Old Man Finch," David began, choosing his words carefully. "I've been looking into some old cases, disappearances from years ago, and some recent ones." Finch paused his whittling. His eyes, roomy and ancient, slowly met David's. They held a deep, profound sadness. "Havenwood takes its toll," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Always has. Or they choose to forget." "What do you mean?" David pressed, leaning forward. "What takes its toll?" Finch finally looked at him directly. "The land, officer. It demands, it calls, it offers peace, prosperity, but there's a price. Always a price. Certain souls, they resonate. They're called to the places where the veil is thin. The old house, the river, the lighthouse." He pointed his whittling knife towards the west. "It's been waking up, been hungry, quote. David felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Finch just smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "It has no name, officer, or many names," whispered in the darkness. "It takes, it assimilates, it wears the voices of the lost to call to the lonely. It feeds on the despair, on the yearning." His eyes seemed to bore into David's, as if seeing right through him. "You're listening, aren't you? To the whispers? To the voices?" David felt a cold prickle of fear. Finch chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. "It has been calling to you, hasn't it? Mimicking the lost, offering solace. It senses your resonance, your weariness, your loneliness. You're a beacon, officer, a very bright one." The whispers now called his name clearly, sometimes in his ex-wife Susan's voice, sometimes in his own, echoing his deepest thoughts, his regrets. He started seeing fleeting shadow figures in his home, in his patrol car, always just at the edge of his vision, coalescing for a split second before dissipating. His sleep became a torture of fragmented nightmares, images of vanishing people, of formless horrors lurking just beneath the surface of reality. Then came the call that sealed his fate. It was a dark, moonless night, the last full moon of autumn. The air was frigid, the town eerily quiet. Unit 27, Emergency Services reporting a distress call. Faint, broken transmission. Origin point traced to the old Havenwood lighthouse. Appears to be a child's voice, dispatch crackled. The lighthouse, the place Finch had mentioned, the last remaining significant location on his list of disappearances. His heart hammered against his ribs. He knew this wasn't a child. This was a lure. For him. Unit 27, copy, David replied, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. He was beyond fear now, just a cold, terrifying certainty. He knew he had to go. He had to face it. The drive to the lighthouse was a blur. The road wound through desolate, windswept plains, the ocean a roaring black expanse to his left. The lighthouse stood stark against the sky, its beam sweeping through the darkness like a desperate, searching eye. Its beam sweeping through the desperate, searching eye. He parked the cruiser a quarter-mile away, the engine still running, its headlights piercing the gloom. He stepped out. The wind howled, whipping his jacket around him, carrying with it the tang of salt and that cloying, sweet metallic scent. The whispers were deafening here, a swirling melody of human voices, animal cries, and a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the very ground. The whispers intensified, coalescing into a chorus of voices, all calling his name, urging him towards the lighthouse. He started walking, his hand on his weapon, his eyes scanning the desolate landscape. The grass around the lighthouse was unnaturally tall, swaying like unseen figures. As he reached the base of the lighthouse, he saw it. Not a child, not a person, but a figure. Tall, impossibly thin, almost translucent in the swirling darkness. It stood perfectly still, facing the ocean, its back to him. It seemed to shimmer, to distort the air around it, and from it emanated the high-pitched, desperate cry of a child. Perfect, heartbreaking. "What do you want?" David bellowed, his voice raw. The figure slowly turned. It had no discernible face, no features, just a shifting void where a head should be. And yet he felt its gaze. He felt eyes, countless unseen eyes, boring into his very soul. Then a voice. Not a whisper, not a mimicry. It was a multi-tonal symphony, a blend of 1,000 voices speaking in unison, yet distinct, echoing from the void that was its face, vibrating in his bones. You answer the call. You seek the truth. You are resonant. The air grew impossibly cold. The sweet metallic scent became overpowering, making him gag. The ground banalic scent became overpowering, making him gag. He felt an immense, unseen pressure, as if something vast and ancient was stirring beneath the earth. The figure stretched, elongating, its limbs becoming impossibly long, its form rippling like disturbed water. He saw glimpses within its shifting shape, a porcelain doll, a silver locket, fragments of faces distorted and screaming, then dissolving back into the void. It was not just taking, it was absorbing. It was an assimilation. It wore the echoes of the lost, their despair, their essence. It was feeding, and it was calling to him. He felt a powerful, undeniable pull, a yearning, a deep resonance within his own weary soul. The whispers returned, now inside his head, calling his name, promising him peace, promising him an end to the loneliness, an end to the searching. They were his own thoughts, twisted, tempting, insidious. Join us, David. Become one with the whispers. End the pain. He stumbled back, terrified. This wasn't a ghost. This was something primordial, something that existed beyond human comprehension, something that preyed on the desperate and the lost. And he was its next meal. He raised his weapon, his hand trembling. He fired. The shot cracked through the night, impossibly loud. The bullet tore through the shimmering figure, and for a split second the void seemed to shriek, a sound that was pure agony and ancient rage. The figure rippled violently, then collapsed into itself, dissolving into a patch of impenetrable darkness that seemed to swallow the light around it. Then silence. Absolute, profound silence. The cold receded. The whispers vanished. The air was clean, fresh, smelling only of salt and the ocean. David stood there, gasping, the smoking gun heavy in his hand, his body trembling uncontrollably. It was gone. He had done something. He had driven it away. But he knew, with a horrifying certainty, that he hadn't destroyed it. You don't destroy something that old, something that fundamental. You only make it angry. He walked back to his cruiser, numb, his mind a shattered mess. He called it in, a broken transmission about a disturbance at the lighthouse. They sent Unit 24, Officer Ryan. She found him slumped over the steering wheel, shivering, staring out at the black expanse of the ocean. "David, what happened?" she asked, her voice concerned. He looked at her, his eyes wide and haunted. He started to speak, to tell her everything. The whispers, the shifting forms, the voices of the dead, the ancient entity. But the words caught in his throat. Who would believe him? She'd see him as a broken man, a cop who finally snapped. Just. "A lot of shadows out here tonight, Sarah," he mumbled, his voice raspy. "And the wind plays tricks." He looked out at the lighthouse, its beam still sweeping, silent and indifferent. They found nothing at the lighthouse, no sign of the figure, no bullet casings. The report was logged as Officer Miller discharged firearm at perceived threat, no corroborating evidence. He was put on leave, then quietly, gently, urged to take an early retirement for stress-related issues. He left Havenwood. He couldn't stay. Every street corner, every quiet stretch of road, every whispering breeze brought back the terror. He lives in a small, cramped apartment in a bustling city now, surrounded by the constant noise of traffic and distant sirens. He prefers the noise. It drowns out the silence. He tries to rationalize it. Stress, burnout, the loneliness of the divorce, the cumulative trauma of years on the force, a breakdown. He tells himself that. He needs to tell himself that. But from that day, he still remains thinking about it. He feels the weight of unseen eyes on him in crowded streets. He hears faint whispers in the din of city life, just on the edge of hearing, calling his name, promising him peace. He scans faces, looking for that subtle shift, that distortion, that sign that something is wearing a borrowed skin. He knows now that true evil doesn't always wear a human face or a monstrous one. Sometimes it's formless, ancient, and lurks just beneath the surface of reality, waiting for the lonely, waiting for the weary, waiting for the weary, waiting for the resonant. But he is not whole. He is forever marked, forever listening, forever wondering if it truly vanished or if it simply retreated, waiting for its next call, its next resonance, its next final desperate plea to pull another into the comforting, terrifying void. Thanks for watching. The veil between our world and theirs is thinner than you think. Each like, each share, each subscription strengthens the connection. Feed the channel before it feeds on you.